Today we're going to take a closer look at what I think are the most interesting 8 bars from YOASOBI's Adrena. There are some curious things I've been sort of encountering as I've been going through the song, figuring out the arrangement and all the chords, trying to understand the function and how they're tying everything together and why it works so well. Now, as we get into this, I'm going to be approaching this from my perspective as a music producer. And even if you don't know much about music theory, I'm sure you're going to be able to hear the effects of what I'm going to be talking about today. So let's jump into it. Here I have the audio for the song inside a DAW. I've set the BPM to 170, which is the tempo for the song. And I've also color-coded and sort of cut up the audio into its different sections. I'm sure you can break this down even further if you really wanted to, but I just wanted to identify sort of, where the main verse, pre-chorus, and chorus happen. Now, today we're just going to focus in on this section right here. There's some really cool stuff happening, as I mentioned at the top, but for context, let's listen to a little bit of the pre-chorus and we'll take it from there. Now, before we zoom in, of course, I want to mention that the pre-chorus and the chorus sound very related, right? They strongly rely on this idea of the Royal Road chord progression, where we have this kind of motion of starting with a 4 chord, then a 5, then a 3, and then a 6, then a 2, then a 5, then it might go to a 1, and then the dominant version of that, and then you might restart that, right? That is something we hear a lot in J-pop. Maybe we can get into the Royal Road chord progression and all its variations in the future. But what I want to focus on is really these 8 bars going from here at the end of the pre-chorus all the way leading us into the chorus. Now, let's start with the ending of the pre-chorus. Let's just figure out what is happening here. We have a variation of the Royal Road chord progression, which is 4, 5, then we have the 7 of 6, and then the 6. And then what happens? We have this note, which is an A going down a few semitones, down to F sharp. So what is the relationship of that A to the E? They're a fifth apart, but it's also kind of the start of that 2-5-1 motion that we heard earlier in the pre-chorus. And then what happens? The only thing we have is this low filtered bass playing an F sharp with a little bit of syncopation, right? We're kind of just hanging on to the last note that we played from that D1 segment. Cool. And then just holding that. But keep in mind, this is F sharp, okay? Then where does that go? Now we get a bit of a power chord on a new note. We have B, which is curious because we were calling a lot of attention to that E earlier by doing the 7 of 6. Now we're doing essentially the 5 of 6. Bringing attention again to that E. Even the melody is pointing us towards an E. But what actually happens? We get a key change. Now, before we get carried away with the chorus, I want to recap everything we've talked about so far, starting with the pre-chorus. We have a 4, 5, 7 of 6, 6. Then we have, and then, now I'd like to play that a little bit differently with just the root notes so that you can hear the motion and the musicality in this, despite the kind of jarring contrast that you hear in the production. Okay, so from the ending of the pre-chorus, Now, I don't know about you, but just hearing that version where things are a little bit more gentle and more evenly paced suddenly doesn't feel so chaotic. In fact, it sounds pretty normal. If I were to resolve that, one of the things that I'm personally taking away is that little chromatic riff. You know, with the faster pacing, with a little bit of that syncopation, actually creates a lot more chaos than we would if we just played each one note at a more even pace. The second thing I want to mention about that is that if we just talk about note names for a second, you know, we have kind of exiting the railroad chord progression, we have C, D, D sharp, E. From the E, we go down to the A. That's a fifth. From the A, we move chromatically down. Just 3 semitones. That's fine. From the F sharp, we go up to the B or down to the B, depending on the octave. But that's another fifth. When we look at all the notes, we're just going through the motions of some circle of fifths movement with a little bit of a chromatic insert in the middle. And the reason that I love this is that it is deceptively simple, but it is so complex once we take into consideration the arrangement of the sounds that are happening in such a small portion of time. You know, we're going from a very smooth synth and keyboard comping section that very cleanly outlines and follows the chords with very simple, kind of punchy, high energy drums, to instruments that are a little bit more aggressive yet very simple, to a single bar where essentially all the sounds that we're hearing are new in that section. We haven't heard that specific drum loop. We haven't heard that bass instrument in that section, with kind of a more atonal type of phrase, a bit more of a gesture than a melody. And then resolving all of that chaos into this final moment that has familiar instruments again, with a chord that we might have been expecting earlier on, but didn't get until now. And all of this is happening in the span of literally 8 seconds, which is just crazy. But what happens at the chorus? Now, this chorus is in A flat major as opposed to the G major that we heard in the previous section. And what I find really cool is just how simple and effective the transition is here. Leela's vocal is actually doing so much of the legwork here to bring us into the key of the chorus. So we have a melody that starts quite dark and normally resolves by going up a semitone. Right? If we're sticking in the world of, let's call this E minor for a second, that sounds really satisfying. But that's not what's happening here. We get a resolution where that leading tone is resolving actually up a whole step as opposed to half a step. I actually really like this change because it makes the chorus feel much brighter than it would if it had just been in the same key. In fact, we can do a little experiment and transpose that entire chorus down into G major to see what would it sound like if we just resolved it as we normally would. Some people might say, I've fixed the chorus in a way, but I actually think it does feel nicer. It feels brighter when we raise the key. Now, just to recap, I'm going to play everything again from the pre-chorus so you can hear the final result. And hopefully a lot of the stuff is making much more sense to you now. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you for checking this out. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more, as I have more things like this coming. And if you have any suggestions for topics or songs that you'd like for me to check out, please let me know in the comments. If you leave your suggestions in the comments, there's a strong chance that I will make a video about it, as I'm exploring different ideas for more videos like this. So thanks again, and as always, I have some links in the video description if you want to check out some of my work or learn music production together. Till the next one, peace.